Yo, what's happening, fellas? Listen, I want to talk about the kinetic sidearm Rat King. Now, this is actually rewarded to you by doing the exotic quest on Titan. It is one of those that was a little more difficult because it required you to have a fire team with you, and it also required you to do the Nightfall, which is kind of more difficult, especially right now since everybody's a little under level. But I wanted to see, is this weapon really worth all the work you put into it? Now, you're going to see some PvP gameplay and also some PvE. The focus today, though, for me, actually was more or less in PvE. I got some PvP gameplay, but I wanted to see how it worked with this Rat Pack exotic intrinsic perk. Now, let me read this out to you. This weapon becomes stronger when nearby allies also have it equipped, and it stacks up to 6 times. So that's something that I wanted to see. What are the limitations to that? What is the range? I would say the range is anything between 10 to 12 meters or less. Anything outside of that, you're really going to lose it on that. Now, I wanted to go ahead and mention this as well because this was news to me. If you have your elemental out, and the next guy next to you, say it was one other teammate, has his Rat King out, his Rat Pack perk will not be activated. It does require you to actually have the weapon out together, and you can visibly see the glow that the weapon actually protrudes whenever you have the weapon out with each other. Something to mention, because I was hoping that I would be able to just kind of, you know, maybe put out a power or something like that, and the Rat Pack perk stay on the entire time, but it does go off the moment one of you puts it away. Now, again, if there's another friend there who also has Rat King out, it'll just pick it up. But again, it'll only be stacking up to 2 then. In order for it to stack up to 6, like it says, you all have to be wielding the weapon together and be within close proximity. Now, something I want to mention about this weapon that's really cool is the Vermin Trade. Reloading immediately after a kill grants a brief period of invisibility. That's pretty nice, and that's reason why, I mean, it's not that vitally useful in PvP because for the most part, you know, you see where the gunfights are taking place. And when you push up on with your friend or whatever and you see a guy there, you can pretty much pick up when he's invisible, especially if he's healing, because it puts off this red aura. Now, we'll say the Vermin Trade in PvE is, oh man, it's nice. And it's something that I don't know how this raid is going to be because it's going to start Wednesday, but it may be great. It may be a big deal because in Crotus Inn, the invisibility perk for most of our hunters was the main way we got through the first part of the raid, especially if you were rocking Patience and Time at that time. And it really helped you out in terms of avoiding all the mobs of Hive there. So the weapon itself has a lot of unique perks, but is it worth it in PvE? Is this something that can make a difference in terms of eating bosses down? I would say yes, it actually is much better, and I'm really curious because the moment I go into the raid Wednesday, I want to see how Rat King actually works with all 6 together. Now, based on strikes and the 3 of us together, you see a very noticeable increase in rate of fire. And that's the thing, it doesn't increase damage, instead it increases rate of fire. And it does kind of suck because the magazine size is only at 15, and so you do chew through that pretty fast. But there's ways to remedy that. You know, you of course have the Titan wall that can automatically reload when you crouch behind it, and then of course there's the rift with those exotic boots that actually will reload the weapon when you step in and out of the rift. But for the most part, the reload is pretty quick on it, so you'll still be able to take advantage of it even without those things. Now, something I want to point out about the sidearm that's very interesting from most weapons. Sidearms, you don't really think of it as a weapon that could flinch your enemies. This weapon actually does. In the midst of us rat packing on a boss here at the end, man, we actually ended up flinching him a couple of times, and that brief period of flinching means you can unload even more damage on him, and so it was happening often. Normally, when I want something to unload and do flinch, have the capabilities to flinch like that, I need something like a sniper or something like that to make them kind of get standstill and make them stop for a minute. And so for this sidearm to be able to do that, and it's really easy to land crits, I think it's honestly a pretty good weapon to go in and out. Just the limitations of having only this weapon out at the same time and being with the close proximity is the only thing I would say that's limiting this weapon. Now let's talk about PvP, man. This is a good PvP weapon. I think it's okay. I wouldn't say it was game-changing for me in any way. It is consistent. That's one thing I liked about it. But there's a lot of other sidearms that I find to be better than this sidearm without taking up your exotic slot. You know, even something like Drang I find to be really good, despite even more sidearms that are better. And honestly, I think Last Hope is probably the best sidearm in PvP right now. It's probably my favorite sidearm thus far, and that is an Amalon sidearm. And it is a 3-round burst sidearm, which is very unique. I think the only other weapons in Destiny 1 at the time that actually had that type of behavior was Trespasser and Dreg's Promise. And so that's really cool that we now have legendaries that have those bursts. But I feel like in terms of time to kill and that in that sense, yes, the weapon is very consistent in PvP. It does have the ability to take down enemies, but it doesn't really make up for it in its time to kill in comparison to some of the other sidearms we have at hand. Well, guys, that is PvE and PvP in terms of Rat King. I think it's a fantastic gun. I really do. I would really just urge you to just try it out in PvE and see how it works. It will surprise you, especially if you can find a boss that does stand still. But again, this does take an exotic slot, and that is always one of those things that really makes us question whether or not the weapon is worth it. If, for instance, I had Wardcliff Coil or Dubious Volley. I keep calling it Dubious Volley. But either way, if I had that, I probably wouldn't take that one off for anything. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming and watching, man, and I'll catch you all later.
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.